Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles. Before we get started, here's a picture of a kitten trying to eat my finger. Although I suppose if I really want to use cats as clickbait on the internet, I should be putting it in the video thumbnail, but hey, I'm new at this whole internet thing. Today we have a very exciting Tier 10 battle for you on Studzianki, the new map in World of Tanks. It's actually based on the location of a battle in 1944 that took place in the Polish village of the same name, although as a result of the battle, the village ended up having its name changed. I can't even begin to pronounce it in Polish, but it translates into English as Armoured Studzianki. I'm still probably butchering the name of the village, but hey, at least I tried. The battle consisted of Russian and Polish troops. The Russians were mostly combat engineers, and the Polish were an armoured brigade fighting against 3 German armoured divisions. It was a horrific defeat for the Germans. Although the Russians and Poles suffered double the number of German casualties, the Germans lost almost 4 times as many tanks, guns, mortars and half-tracks. Today, the village boasts a monument to the battle that looks like this, as well as a small museum commemorating the event. And it's on this map where we're going to see something pretty special today. Courtesy of Delta Tinderthot here in the TVP, but also one specific teammate, Easy Blah Blah in the T49. We're not going to see a huge amount of Easy Blah Blah in the T49 at first. It's primarily all going to be about Delta here in the TVP as he attempts to exploit the early advantage that his team gains by being the first to make it into this ditch here running down the centre of the map. The thing about this ditch is getting into it first is good, particularly if your team can get into it in strength, and so far Delta's team appear to be doing that. The reason it's good is because it puts the enemy team, who are trying to do the same thing, immediately onto the defensive, but you have to exploit that very narrow window of opportunity between when the enemy tanks like this are trying to beat you into the ditch and when they realise that they're not going to do it and they immediately start falling back and reorganising in defence. You can't just sit in the ditch. The longer you give the enemy team time to organise a defence, to realise that they've lost the ditch and they need to start defending against you coming out of the ditch, the harder it's going to be to get out. It's a bit like winning the hill on Malinovka. Winning the hill is great, especially if you can kill a lot of enemy tanks doing it, but once you've got control of the hill, now what are you going to do? Because winning the hill isn't a victory objective. Now you have to get off the hill in order to either kill all of the remaining enemy tanks or get to one of the victory objectives. And getting off the hill, it's a lot easier said than done because there's a lot of open ground that you have to cover, and there are probably a lot of enemy tanks sitting in the forest at the bottom of the hill. Just like here, there are going to be a lot of enemy tank destroyers, or IS-7 drivers called Steve, in the bushes on that hill over there on the far side of the open ground. This isn't quite as bad as Malinovka because you do have the village that you can use to move forward without hopefully getting shot up by all of the tank destroyers that you know are going to be on the far side of the open ground there in the concealment on the hill. But getting out of this ditch still leaves you vulnerable because you have to expose your lower glacis. Now, several of Delta's teammates are finding out the hard way as they climb out of the ditch. And when you're climbing out of the ditch, unless you've got extremely good gun depression... Oh, there we go. One tank destroyer, Charioteer. Only tier 8, but does have a very good 105mm gun. See, this is the thing. Climbing out of this ditch renders you vulnerable and unable to return fire. You're exposing the lower glacis, and unless you've got great gun depression, you're almost certainly not going to be able to shoot back at the tanks, taking advantage of your exposed lower glacis as you climb out of the ditch. And that, of course, is what this Catholic Church is for. It's to allow the team in the ditch to get out of the ditch without getting slaughtered in a crossfire from the tanks defending in the village and from the tank destroyers on the hill to the rear. However, this creates a bit of a choke point right behind this church, and if there had been artillery in play, there isn't, we do at least have that to be grateful for, but if there had been artillery in play, this would be a shooting gallery for them. All of these tanks packed in behind that church as they try to exploit the advantage that they gain from being the first ones into the ditch. And Delta's team have kind of done that, but it did take them a lot longer than it should have. Unfortunately, when you're playing a random battle with completely random teammates, it's probably always going to take as long as this to happen, because there isn't any communication going on, and that's just the nature of random battles. And while Delta's team were winning down at the southern end of the map, they've been losing pretty comprehensively up at the northern end of the map. And the tanks that were winning down at the southern end of the map took a lot of damage in the process, and are now being feasted upon by the tank destroyers on the hill on the far side of the open ground. Once again, getting into the ditch is great, but then you have to get out of the ditch. How are you going to do that? Now you're out of the ditch, you're into the village. Great. Now you've got to get out of the village. How are you going to do that? Delta, meanwhile, attempting to prop up the defense on this side of the map, but there's a limit to what you can actually realistically expect to achieve in a TVP against an E75 and a T57 Heavy who might have a full clip loaded, and in order to get out there and fight them, he's going to have to cross open ground and expose himself to flanking fire from the tank destroyers on the hill on the far side of the field. So as far as risk versus potential reward is concerned, I think Delta has decided, and I kind of agree with him, that the risk far outweighs the reward, and if he left the safety of the low ground to fight up in the north, it would have kind of really just been reinforcing failure. And I think he made the right decision, because now there are only 4 of them left. All of the tanks to the north are dead. The 2 survivors down to the south, the T110E5 and the SU-130, have won the village, but they're stuck there. They can't get out of it without getting picked apart by the hidden tank destroyers on the hill overlooking the village. And while I did say at the beginning of the video that most of the credit in this game was going to be down to Delta here and Easy Blah in the T49, who is sitting there spotting like an absolute boss. Balls of steel, that man. You do have to give some credit to the SU-130 and the T110E5 as well, because they've recognised that the village is hopeless and they have also pulled out, leaving those enemy tank destroyers with absolutely nothing to shoot at. And they're also falling back over here in order to take advantage of single enemy tanks pushing one by one from the north into the direction of the cap. So well done to them too, for recognising that their position was hopeless, and instead of just sitting there and waiting to die or complaining about it, actually doing the right thing. And of course the reason why it's all working is because of the fantastic spotting being done by Easy Blah Blah in the T49 up there. It's nice to see a light tank that actually knows when to spot, when to stay still, don't move, don't shoot, and just do a light tank's job. The overall situation is still far from good, however. Delta is in a fairly precarious position here. I mean, that STB up there has been doing some consistent and effective damage, and Delta kind of has to choose between getting shot at by the STB, which is never fun, or turning to face the T57 Heavy and Lorraine, that have managed to sneak all the way down from the north, using that ditch for concealment, and trading shots with an autoloader unless you know you can reliably bounce that autoloader's shots is never a good idea. And if it hadn't been for the fact that the Lorraine bounced his last shot and missed his first shot, Delta would have been dead. Unfortunately, all of his teammates, with the exception of Easy Blah Blah up there in the T49, are also dead. But Easy Blah Blah understands that there's a time for sitting quietly on a hill and spotting the enemies, and there's a time for putting your man pants on and doing nearly 1,000 high explosive damage to the STB-1. Likewise, Delta also understands that very little good is likely to come of sitting in that village waiting for the the Lorraine to reload, and for the T57 Heavy to come looking for him. He has to keep Easy alive, and he barely manages to do it before the STB reloads. The two of them now have barely 100 health between them, and they're fighting 4 enemies, including a T57 Heavy. The I keep saying AMX, it's a Lorraine, is a one-shot kill, but there's also a Death Star, and that Charioteer. And if either of them gets spotted, and judging by the shots whistling across the map over there, Easy Blah Blah has been spotted, they're one-shot kills. Although they do bite back pretty hard. You just heard the T49's howitzer going off there. It sounded kind of like the sun coughing. Oh wait, there's the Lorraine. What? No, you have to kill him. Okay, the Lorraine is down. Delta obviously got spotted, but there's a very convenient factory here he can duck into. Here comes the T-57 Heavy. Now Delta obviously got spotted here. Surely the T-57 Heavy knows that he's driving into a crossfire from an autoloader. He just ate a high explosive shell from the T-49. But it's like he's tunnel visioning. Oh man, you don't want to be doing that. Oh no, less of those bouncers, thank you very much. Got him. Right. Oh crap, it's the Charioteer. And saved by the tracks. There's the Death Star up ahead. Ducks in a cover behind the building. The Charioteer comes out, playing a bit of catchy, chasey, kissy, and rides straight into a high explosive shell fired by the T-49. That just leaves the Death Star. The two of them have gone from having about 150 health between them against 5 enemy tanks to a 2-on-1 situation against the FV-215B. Now he is down in that ditch, which is going to make him kind of difficult to spot. Now you have to ask yourself at this point just exactly how brave is Easy Blah Blah in the T-49 feeling. Because he does stand the best chance, and he's going for it, and he's done it. He's spotted the Death Star. Now he just has to survive spotting the Death Star. And now they're doing the old bait and switch. The T-49 is moving and keeping the Death Star's attention occupied, giving Delta the opportunity to get around behind him, because remember the Death Star's turret doesn't rotate all the way around. He's in the perfect position. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. Holds the 4th shot because he really needs to make it count, and now they've reversed the situation. The Death Star is now turning around to try to engage Delta. Easy Blah Blah spots the opportunity, does not waste it, and pounces on the Death Star, slamming a 152mm high explosive shell straight into the back of his big fat stupid turret. And that, boys and girls, well, I don't know about you, but that was some pretty impressive teamwork. Thoroughly well done to both of them. For a pair of random battle teammates, remember these two guys were not in a platoon, they were not on voice comms, they just saw what needed to be done and did it, easily claiming the top 2 spots on the team by experience earned, and a thoroughly enjoyable game to watch into the bargain. Or at least I thought so, and I hope you agree, because that is it for today. Here's another quick picture of a kitten before we go. I'll be collecting her in less than 2 weeks. And as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.